programs are working and which are not. For small businesses, for instance, they were hammered. The ones that even survived all the COVID protocols are still struggling because we have a public safety crisis and they're being knocked off daily because you can steal $1,000 or less of merchandise and there's no consequences. So I want to lower taxes exclusively for small businesses to inspire growth and prosperity because they deserve it, and it's too hard to do business under normal times in New York City.
Same question.
Thank you. I believe the question was, how do we keep jobs and companies in New York City? And I will tell you that people should want to be here in New York City. We are the greatest city in the world. And yes, we have gone through a tremendous amount of challenges. Many, many people lost their lives despite the wealth and the array of services that are present here across the 5 boroughs. So how do we create a city that is attractive to corporations, companies, families, tourists? There are a few things that you have to do. You have to make sure that it is an affordable and livable city, that you are able to afford to live here, that you feel safe when you are on the streets and in our public transit system, and to ensure that this is really a place that prioritizes our pedestrians, seniors, and people with limited mobility. So in order to keep this city livable, in order to keep it attractive, we have to ensure that people feel like they can afford to live here.
Thank you. So I'll just say that since you mentioned AOC, I'll just say I disagree. We shouldn't be raising taxes. We should be lowering taxes not only on businesses, but on individuals and on families. We do absolutely need to retain businesses. We also need to retain people. We're in this new district for the first time because New York pre-COVID was losing people and we lost a congressional seat. And the devastated losses that we've seen during COVID are only going to make our city less livable because we're losing that tax base and we have to make up for it. Throwing money at problems doesn't solve things. Many people in this room know that I've done a lot of work around schools for a long time. New York City funds our schools at twice the national average, and that hasn't given us better results. We can't tax our way out of the problems we have in New York City. We absolutely do need to address crime. We absolutely do need to make this a more business-friendly city than it has been during the COVID pandemic, and raising taxes is not the way to do it.
Right. I agree that we need to lower the tax for small property owners because they are struggling, and also small business. We need to help them to thrive. They are the backbone of New York City. And also we need to provide tax rebates to low-income families and New Yorkers who need help. So we need to tax the rich to fund more social programs. And particularly during this pandemic, we need more mental health programs and other social programs to help New Yorkers during this pandemic. So we need to tax the rich to fund social programs, and then we need to lower the tax for small business and small property owners and needy New Yorkers so they can get through this in terms of inflation and other challenges. Thank you.
I think we have to make New York livable in a lot of ways. One has to do with crime, and that is triggered in many respects by the epidemic of gun violence here and the epidemic of guns. I fought as a DA, prosecuted gun cases. I want to see a ban on assault weapons and so forth, but I also have a plan of putting pressure on gun manufacturers to reduce the level of violence and gun violence in this city and around the country. We've just ignored that problem. The second thing is we have to distinguish between local taxes and federal taxes. Congress people don't get a say in local taxes and they don't get to vote on them, but we get to vote on federal taxes. My concern is that we have steadily reduced taxes on the rich compared to other people. When Ronald Reagan was president and the country had a much higher economic situation, taxes were much higher on the rich. let's think about how we're going to fund the programs for better environment, better transit, stopping guns, better schools. Where's that money going to come from? So we have to have a much better system and stop subsidizing the oil companies.
Let me get out of the way so we can...
Sure, no worries.
Yes.
You're not blocking anything. First of all, we need people in this city. We need businesses. We need tourists. Tourists aren't going to visit us if we don't have open businesses, if we don't have the financial district, which Mayor Eric Adams is saying that there's a possibility that we might lose the financial district, the business district, because people are working from home. And that's a problem, because people want to visit Wall Street. We have so many tourists there every morning taking pictures. We need to see people. We need to keep corporations. We're already seeing hedge funds, corporations moving out of New York City and going to Miami. Why do we need them to relocate? We need them here. We rely on those corporations. Now, there is a balance. We need to find that right balance. There are different income tax brackets. What I would do on a federal level is I would reevaluate these income tax brackets without hurting small businesses, without hurting people like us. My brother works for a company where he's getting taxed from the state, city, federal. You know, he ends up with half of what he's supposed to get because he's a single man. He's not married, so they take half his check. So we need to work in a manner where we're not hurting civilians like us and we're not hurting small businesses, but at the same time, we don't want large corporations to leave us because we rely on corporations to bring business into our city.
Thank you. Let's start with Carlina. I'm giving you some warning, so we'll start with you and then come down back to Brian. Switching gears a little bit. Analysis of November 2021 election results show that New York City's Asian communities have moved to the right, voting for Curtis Sliwa over Eric Adams. What do you think is causing the shift, and how do you plan to address this for New York 10 constituents?
I think what people really want to see right now is someone who is going to talk to them straight, someone who's going to speak to them honestly, and who is trying to address the issues that are most pressing to our individual communities and not pushing whatever individual agenda they may have. Right now, I feel like NY10 is an incredibly diverse community. I think it reflects actually my council district very, very much. And there are growing populations that want to feel like their representative is seeing them and wanting to listen to them. I am someone that has been very intentional in doing that during my tenure in the city council. You can see via my accomplishments on housing, healthcare, small business, transit, and really making sure that people know that they can come in and that I am accessible. How people respond is in terms of any election, is that they want someone to feel like that someone is going to their communities, speaking to them directly, and ensuring that they know how they can participate in democracy. I have a very good feeling that NY10 is going to choose the person who has the best record in delivering on the issues that we're fighting for, and that I am that candidate.
Is that it?
Yeah.
You have more time? Okay.
I think the reason why Asian Americans shifted to the right is the same reasons why many African Americans and Hispanic Americans and other Americans have shifted to the right in this city. And it's because the Democratic Party in New York right now is struggling to actually meet voters where they are and what our concerns are. Carlina just mentioned a bunch of concerns of healthcare and housing and small business and transit. Not on that list was crime. Elizabeth Holtzman just talked about going after gun manufacturers. Well, we need a district attorney who prosecutes criminals. We need city council people who talk about the crime problem in our city. We have a district attorney who just saw a small bodega owner get attacked and decided that that guy, the bodega owner who got attacked, belonged in Rikers Island. That's the thing that's turning off voters from the left-wing progressive part of the Democratic Party. It's talking about everything other than what we actually see with our own two eyes when we walk out the street, which is the increase in crime. That's what we need to talk about because that's what voters are worried about.
Hi. Okay. So I would say I would agree that the crime and hate crime are two of the pressing concerns for Asian American community. So for the past 2 years, we haven't, as a city and state, New York hasn't done enough to combat, the ridiculous, increase in hate crime against the Asian American community, and also property safety. So as an everyday New Yorker who takes train to go to work and travel around the city, crime, people don't feel safe on the street or on the train. That's the biggest problem. If we can bring the crime down and also fight back against the hate crime by supporting legislations to fight back the hate crime. So for myself, I have collected over 50,000 signatures to support Congresswoman Grace Mann's hate crime bill. So we need, as a congressional person, I will fight hard to fight back hate crime. Hate crime against any group is unacceptable. And thank you.
Thanks very much. I agree with that statement. Hate crime is unacceptable against any group. And I have, in my entire career, fought against ethnic and racial discrimination. We also had Asian hate crime when I was DA. We prosecuted. I'm the only one up here, by the way, that's put anyone in jail for any kind of violence, and I'm proud of having done it. There's some people who say nobody should go to jail. Excuse me, I was a prosecutor. We had unbelievable crime when I was a DA, and we had to fight it tooth and nail in every way. Guns were part of the problem, because one thing I know is that there are plenty of people who without a gun are a coward. You put a gun in their hands and they're a mass murderer. So we've got to do something about guns, but we've got to do something about effective prosecution. What can the federal government do? That's the question here. What the federal government can do is support, as I did when I was in Congress, support funds for local law enforcement that professionalized it, that improved it, that made sure it was effective. I was on the subway about a month ago, and I saw a homeless, deranged man mouthing anti-Asian hate statements. I found a cop at the next subway stop, and I said, at Grand Central Station, there's a guy walking around who could be a danger. What do you think the cop did? Walked away. So we can't tolerate that. We need better law enforcement. I mean, that's a long subject, but that's where the federal government can help in terms of providing funding and training, supervision, and the like. I'm sorry.
Going back to your question about why Asian Americans are shifting to the right, because we're not seeing, as Americans, Asian Americans are Americans, we're not seeing change. And year after year, we're voting in, with all due respect to all our Democratic candidates here, but we're voting in Democratic leadership. Most of them are career politicians who are not delivering, and we need to see delivery here. The first one here is defunding the police. A lot of candidates are in support of defunding the police. If anything, we need to work with our NYPD. We need to support our law enforcement. And if we're talking in particular to the Asian community here, we need to have our NYPD work with the Asian Crime Task Force, and we need to provide more funding for the Asian Crime Task Force. I live right around the block from here, and just 3 days ago, I saw a Chinese lady just get punched in the face for no reason, and that happened 4 months after I created my campaign video. My campaign video is on Twitter at Benine, where you can see I was talking about different Asian Americans being attacked in New York. We're seeing this on a daily basis, and this is why we need a leader to call to action, to deliver, and to start showing people that we can do something about it and not just talk the talk, but we need to we really need to start taking action. Thank you.
So, why are Asian Americans shifting to the right? I spoke to an Asian American small business owner about this. This is a man I've known for a long time. Can't stand Donald Trump. But he's at the point where he thinks that the Democratic Party is not looking after the Asian American interests. It comes down to public safety, but it's not just public safety. It's schools, education, and the quality of it has been deteriorated here in New York City. And part of the reason we've seen the exodus in public schools is because a lot of families who take academia very seriously and raise their children to take academia very seriously, are not getting what they want. It's the gifted and talented programs that were abolished. It's the charter schools that they want more of, because frankly, right now, 23 out of 25 of the best or highly ranked mathematical schools are charter schools, meaning of the 25 highest rated mathematics schools, 23 of 25 are charter schools. And it's the same with the yeshivas. The yeshivas are being attacked. The DOE has no right to come in and say, okay, forget freedom of religion or cultural preservation. We want high quality schools and we want public safety. And that's the reason Asian Americans are shifting to the right.
Great, thank you. Bill, you'll take the next two questions. We're gonna start switching it up a little bit because, it gets boring when 7 people answer the same question. So I hope you guys are okay. It's gonna be kind of random. We have a lot of questions to get through and we're gonna just ask them. So, Phil. You can just do half and half, so it's not too crazy.
Okay, so let's do it. For this side, here's the question. What is your position, the 3 candidates over here, what is your position regarding migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border? Where should they be placed if you support them entering the U.S.? For migrants with no place to go in New York City, would you put them on a bus and send them to Washington, D.C.?
First and foremost, I'm very supportive of the fact that Trump was going to build our wall. We need to protect our border. That's number one. I'm a byproduct of Lebanese parents who migrated to America for a better life, to earn the American dream. And they came here legally. So we support legal immigration, but there is a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigrants who are taking legal immigrants who became naturalized citizens, taking their jobs, taking their opportunities. We need to put America first. We need to put America, as in us Americans, we need to put ourselves first. And so I'm a big supporter of border security, and that's how I would handle legal immigration. I'm a big supporter of legal immigration. Thank you.
My parents came here as immigrants. I'm the first generation of my family to be here. Immigrants have made an extraordinary contribution to this country. We wouldn't be where we are today without it. I don't like the idea. I had the opportunity to be here of pulling up the ladder once I get in. Other people should have the same opportunity. I think the issue with regard to the southern border is not just illegal immigrants, it's refugees and people seeking asylum. We have signed a protocol about refugees. Remember that, a treaty about that. So we can't just throw people out because they didn't come in the way someone else's parents came in. My parents came in, my mom's family came in, they were fleeing. They were fleeing communism, they were fleeing pogroms. I know that, and they found sanctuary here, and I'm eternally grateful, but I don't want to shut the door on anybody else. I want us to follow the right way to do it, and we can, if we want to. I resigned. I was on the Homeland Security Advisory Committee, talking about your idea of throwing the immigrants on a bus. They were separating children from their parents. I resigned in protest of that action, and I just want to say that I said to the commissioner, you should be the one who's resigning for having a program like that. I shouldn't have to resign.
Thank you. Let's not forget that this country was built by immigrants. The contribution of all immigrants matter, right? And for Asian American community, don't forget, in the early time, right, there was Chinese Exclusion Act, and there were a lot of discriminatory laws against, our Asian American community. And we got the equal rights during 1965, the Civil Rights Acts, let's not forget about that. So we had to open our arms, like Elizabeth said, there were, refugees seeking help from us. American has been known, for taking be a leader in the world to that. And a lot of Asian Americans right now are Americans because of that. during the Vietnam War, that's how, Vietnamese American became part of the family, right? A lot of them. So let's not forget about that. So we have to open our doors to all movements. I support DACA. We need to have a pathway for, documented and documented, use to become part of our society. Thank you.
I want to ask next.
Where's the mic?
Oh, I have it, sorry.
Okay,
They all got rotated.
so this question's for the other three candidates. New York City Department of Education's Office of Student Enrollment projected that they would lose another 30,000 students by the end of this fall. This is on top of the 120,000 students who already left the public school system for the last 5 years. Mayor Eric Adams said himself last week that we have a massive hemorrhaging of students. Massive hemorrhaging. We are in a dangerous place with the number of students that we are dropping. If elected, what would you do to stop this exodus and attract students and their families to move back to New York City?
Again, a lot of people don't remember this, but Obama was for school choice. And I think we need to start looking at that again, because people don't think, families don't think, parents don't think that they're getting a quality education in the public schools. And that doesn't even speak to the fact that the public schools were closed for a year while private schools were open. Parents have had enough. And again, 23 of the 25 highest rated in mathematics with regards to public schools are charter schools. And we need to start respecting and looking into whoever can provide the best education for their children. Because if we don't do it here in New York City, then they're going to do it in the suburbs. And that's what we're seeing. Everybody's leaving. Not everybody, but families in particular who are raising small children, middle school children, high school children. We have to do a better job. And public safety, obviously. People are afraid. Thanks.
Thank you. This is such an important question because the decrease in enrollment and of course the fair student funding formula is actually quite flawed. So the way that funds reach our schools is inequitable, and I will tell you, you can see just in NY10, there are school districts that are blocks away from each other, that not only are the PTAs very, very different, the parent-teacher associations in terms of how much money they can raise because of more affluent communities compared to low-income communities, the funding for those programs and services within them really must be addressed. You can do that with local, state, and federal funds. One thing that I would do as the Congresswoman is ensure that we are using federal funds to fund a model called community schools. It is an excellent model inside some of our current schools right now. PS 188 on Houston Street is an excellent example. And so we have to ensure that we are looking at the entire family, that we are supporting parents, and that we are also creating a livable and safe city where people want to come and have their kids go to school. It is absolutely attainable. We have a lot of talent. We have to ensure that we're supporting the teachers, and that again, that equitable funding is reaching our neediest families. You okay?
Yeah, this is a subject that's very hard to talk about in 1 minute because I know so much about it and I care so much about it. I have 4 children in public school and I have done more than anybody up here or anyone in this race to fight for the kind of excellent public schools that will keep families in the public school system instead of chasing them out. I could not disagree with Carlina more. Community schools are what equity activists want to impose on families. If city council people like Carlina would actually listen to families like mine and the families that I have worked with so hard these many years, you would know that what we want is excellent education that prepares our children for global and international job competition that they will be facing when they graduate. We don't want ideological, equity-oriented solutions imposed on our family. What we want is what we have told you we want again and again and again, which is high-quality, excellent education. Stop ignoring us and start listening to us because that's what we need and that's what we want for our children.
Okay, so I will ask 2 questions, and we'll have 4 of you answer one. Is that okay? And 2 of you answer the other. We see more and more electric and hybrid cars in the streets, but no charging stations. If elected, do you support federal funding for more charging stations in your district and in our state? Why or why not? Take that.
Let me go in a different way.
Yeah, sure.
You want us to answer it?
Sure. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, we can, of
Yeah,
course. You're the moderator.
I know. It's not picking on anyone. Yes, go ahead.
And anyone who has questions for me that we don't answer tonight, Carlina Rivera.NYC, okay? So I do support electrifying as many vehicles in the city as possible and using federal funds to incentivize that infrastructure as well as using electric vehicles. Cars, beyond our larger buildings, which are actually the largest polluters in terms of carbon emissions, the city council, we passed the Climate Mobilization Act, which was the city and country's most comprehensive bill to address carbon emissions coming from building. Cars are also very, very big polluters. We should be transitioning to electric, and we do need the charging stations to ensure that we can charge those cars. We should also be electrifying our buses. We had a missed opportunity with the postal trucks recently, and this should be an initiative that we take on federally and locally.
I'm all for electric cars. They do reduce carbon footprints. They're better for the environment, but we can't force people to do that. And I certainly don't think it's a good use of federal funds to set up charging stations. I think there are better uses. Thanks.
Maud and Jimmy, and you guys will get a different question.
Can I actually, as a Republican, answer on that question?
Sure. I mean, all of you can answer that question.
I would love to answer the immigration question as well.
I do think we could put some federal funds towards supporting charging stations. I think all new industries, electric cars is one great example, but I'll give you another. Cryptocurrencies, we have a lot of onerous regulations that are chasing new industry out of the city, and I think we need to make sure that we don't do that. I think federal leadership can help on the local and state level to understand the ways in which we should encourage those new industries, whether it's electric vehicles or whether it's cryptocurrencies. We need to support and develop those new industries so that we have the upside and the benefit of that, which is both employment and an increased tax base.
Thank you. I wouldn't argue against electric vehicles, but I wouldn't encourage people to purchase electric vehicles. And the reason I say this is because, especially in this community, we've been seeing a high rise of incidents of, people, being hit by an electric bike, an e-bike. I've actually attended a few press conferences where we had victims hit by e-bikes. One actually just happened 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if anyone's aware. Right next to us in front of Circus Fruit Supermarket, where Trump was passing by right next to the lady driving her electric bike. I was actually downstairs when I heard what happened. And so I would not encourage it. It's very dangerous. We care about the safety of our civilians. So even if it's a benefit for it's a benefit in terms of climate, there are other ways where we can benefit climate. So there are different ways to do that. Thank you.
I think President Biden had proposed financing for additional electric stations for cars. Don't get me started on electric bikes. I'm not going there. But when it comes to cars, obviously that's a good thing if we can. Of course, electric cars are very expensive. So, who are we talking about? I think the real answer here in the city is not just to provide additional support for very rich people who can afford, the fancy Teslas, but what about mass transit? That's a critical problem. We talked about this at a forum last night. There are transit deserts around the city. In Brooklyn, trains were not, subway lines were not extended because of racial issues. We have to have a great plan for New York in terms of transit, in terms of public access to public transit. That's also something that's vital, and it shouldn't be a secondary issue.
Thank you. I want to build on that. Yes, I do agree. We have to take, global warming and climate change seriously. Just this Monday, you saw when New York City had heavy rain, the subway system, we have suspended service, service interruption, in addition to signal malfunction, all these issues.